Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday service of Now Creations. It's always a joy to remind you of the most important thing of life, and that is that you are in conscious contact with the God Spirit at the very center of your being. There's nothing more important, nothing more joyful, nothing stronger than simply knowing that presence within you. May you glory in it today. My dear friends, while it is true that life can be quite complicated, it is also true that life can be quite simple when you know what you're doing and why you're doing it. As you have advanced in your spirituality, you have also removed many of the blockages of your life. You have removed much of the complexity, and you have advanced in that far more simple, and might I say, wiser view of life. You now clearly realize what you are doing, and you know why you're doing it. Very simply, you are creating an environment of love for yourself, your family, for your friends, and for the world. That's what you're doing. And you understand that this environment of love is a part of the evolution of humanity and of the plan of God. That's why you're doing it. It really is that simple when you know what and why. Yes, of course, there was a time when we didn't know quite so well. There was a time in our life where things seemed extremely complicated. It is precisely this point of reducing the complexity of life from its complicated form to a wiser, simpler form of life that I will address in today's teaching. I will address this teaching through the telling of 3 stories of life, all of which will be somewhat familiar to you, if not in detail, surely in the overview. The title of today's teaching is 3 Stories. The first story concerns the life of a single young man who was born in Vermont in 1895. Very simple young guy. He served in the First World War and afterwards married and became quite successful in the world until the stock market crashed in 1929. His financial problems led to an already existing problem of alcohol addiction. The drinking problem worsened until 1934, when he had a spiritual awakening. Some people called it a white light experience. He, like others before him and after him, called out to God, "If there be a God, give me help, show yourself to me." The response was immediate, and from that day, on December 4, 1934, until his passing on January 24, 1971, almost 40 years later, he never touched another drink. Between the years 1934 to 1939, this gentleman, with a co-partner, founded the organization called Alcoholics Anonymous. But his story, his personal story, was just beginning. In 1939, the book Alcoholics Anonymous was published with its now famous 12-step program that can free not only someone with an alcohol addiction, it can free any form of any addiction, especially the worst addiction, the addiction to the ego. This person had many insights into life that led to the 12-step program. One of his most insightful observations was that alcoholics try to drink their religion. That just made such sense to me. Alcoholics try to drink their religion. It was obvious that alcoholics, or anyone in egoic addiction, they do something, in a sense, to release themselves from the apparent problems that they are having. Rather than turning to a higher spiritual path called religion at that time, they turn to alcohol or drugs or sex or gambling or shopping. What this gentleman saw, and let's be clear, he did have an unusual spiritual experience. What this person saw was that through his spiritual experience, there was a greater power that a person could call upon, a power that was greater than the compulsion to drink and could lead a person to sobriety and a much healthier way of living. Well, in order to do so, to follow this power, a person had to do two things. The first one was to accept the fact that they needed help to control their addiction, that they could not do it by themselves. And then secondly, that a person would have to access and could access this higher power within them. It had nothing to do with a religion or any other philosophy of life. It was simply a higher power within them, a higher power within them that was able to release them from their addiction and reestablish their truer sense of self. Now we are getting to the point of the first story. The gentleman that I have been referring to went by the name of Bill W., or later on his full name became known both within and outside Alcoholics Anonymous circles. His name, Bill Wilson. Bill recognized that the solution to any addiction was a vital spiritual experience. The solution to any addiction was a vital spiritual experience. Regardless of the addiction, the solution was a vital spiritual experience. Whether it was experienced as a white light experience, or whether it was learned incrementally, step by step, in fact 12 steps, Bill knew that you had to access the higher power within you to overcome the temptation to alcoholism. Now we are getting to an even more major point of this first story. Bill was a good meditator, and he maintained his meditation practice from his day of sobriety in 1934 until his passing in 1971. But Bill's story is not over. Bill was always open-minded to any type of meditation that would connect him to the higher power. Thus, in 1968, just 2 years prior to his passing, and 35 years into his meditation practice, Bill was introduced to transcendental meditation, as taught by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. At 74 years of age, Bill was open to receive new insights into his spiritual practice. I want to say that again. At 74 years of age, Bill was open to receive new insights into his spiritual practice. A person who attended Bill's first transcendental meditation experience reported these words of Bill: "It works." Many of you acquainted with the 12-step program are very aware of that 11th step. That 11th step states that prayer and meditation are the principal means of contact with God, to that higher power. I trust that Bill's story has made its point to you. Meditation. Meditation is the absolute basis to experience higher power in your life. Meditation is the absolute basis to experience the higher power in your life. We're now ready for the second story. Although many of you know him by his spiritual name, Ram Dass, given to him by his guru, the name Ram Dass, meaning servant of God. Actually, he himself, Richard Alpert, was born in 1931 in Boston, Massachusetts, and he received his PhD in psychology from Stanford. In the 1960s, Richard, while teaching at Harvard, spent much of his time with another Harvard psychologist teacher. His name was Timothy Leary. I think that many of you know where I am going with this. Alpert and Leary were attempting to study the mind-body connection through the use of psychedelic drugs, LSD being one of the more popular ones of the group. Apparently, the powers at Harvard found their work too controversial, and both were dismissed. Leary and Alpert parted ways. While Leary became a spokesperson of the countercultural revolution, Alpert began a spiritual journey and eventually became a disciple of the Hindu guru Neem Karoli Baba, who eventually gave Alpert that name Ram Dass, again meaning servant of God. In 1970, as the story went on, Albert Ram Dass now wrote a very popular book, which gave rise to a phrase which has become very popular in many spiritual circles. The title of the book and its popular phrase is "Be Here Now." It's a terrific phrase, terrific phrase. I think many of us have appreciated this phrase, and I think we still find it to be a very popular affirmation and rescue power. Be here now. Be present in your true self at this moment of now. It's a truly wonderful spiritual affirmation. The phrase, I think, was really a preview to Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, written in 1997. Well, one of the reasons I wanted to tell Ram Dass's story concerns an episode that he often talked about when he was visiting his guru, Neem Karoli Baba, at a particular time. Neem Karoli Baba was asking Ram Dass about his previous experiences with LSD. He also asked if Richard had any of the drugs with him. Richard did, and showed Neem a handful of the drugs. This is apparently what happened, according to Richard. Richard gave him one of the pills. Neem said that he did not just want one pill, but he wanted the entire handful. Somewhat surprised, Richard complied, and Neem swallowed all of them. After a period of time when the drugs should have taken their effect, there seemed to be no change in Neem. Richard could not understand this, to which Neem Karoli Baba responded in these powerful words. LSD brings you into the room with Christ that you cannot stay. It is better to know the Christ than just to visit him. I'll say it again. LSD brings you into the room to become the Christ that you cannot stay. It's better to become the Christ than to visit him. Quite a truth. It's better to become the Christ, one's true self, than to simply visit him. Great truth. At this time, a legitimate question arises. What were Bill Wilson and Richard Alpert looking for that seemed to be absent in their lives? May I suggest that each of them had the following 3 progressive steps. The first step can be presented in the title of Viktor Frankl's wonderful book, Man's Search for Meaning. It seems quite clear that this is what Bill and Richard were looking for. They were looking for a meaning and a purpose in their life, which their present lives and the world were not giving them. Something was obviously missing from their lives and from the lives of their contemporaries and many of our contemporaries. The second step. The second progression was where they looked for meaning and purpose. Each of them looked for this meaning in the same place, outside of themselves. Bill chose alcohol. Richard chose drugs. It never dawned on them that they were looking in the wrong places. And as a result, each of their pursuits left them disappointed. They just didn't know better. And because they didn't know better, they were not able to do. The third step is not just what they found, but where they found it. Bill found it through a very deep spiritual experience. Richard found it through the guidance of an Indian guru. But each found the same thing. They found a presence that was within them. And as they pursued this inner presence, this presence revealed itself to them increasingly. I want to say that again. They both found this presence. They looked within. And this presence, as they pursued it, began to reveal itself to them ever increasingly. Bill became the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, and Richard, and gave us that beautiful 12-step program to break all forms of egoic addiction. And Richard became a spiritual teacher to many, inspiring them, well, to become the Christ, not just to visit every once in a while. Now you might be saying to yourself, Vince, you said there would be 3 stories in today's teaching, and you only gave us 2 of them. What's the third story? The third story is your story. The third story is your story. Your quest for meaning and purpose. And I think that we have learned 2 essential lessons from Bill and Richard. The first lesson is where not to look. Where not to look. Both Bill and Richard initially looked outside of themselves for the answers to the meaning and purpose of life. Have we not often, just done the same thing? Perhaps we've not used drugs or alcohol, that we have been pretty much bound by looking outside, especially concerning self-centeredness and the materialism of the world. These 2 experiences have impeded our own spiritual journey, self-centeredness and excessive materialism, and they continue to impede the spiritual journeys of so many people. The vast majority of people still today are seeking the good life outside of themselves. And like many of us, they are finding it very difficult to re-identify the personality self with their spiritual self, and to re-identify the world they live in, not as the external world, but God's world. It's very difficult to re-identify. The vast majority of the world's population is not only oblivious to where to look, but also they seem to be content with the lower energies of self-centeredness and materialism. Or if discontent arises, which it often does, they, like, well, Bill and Richard, want a quick fix, opening a bottle, popping a pill, and then going right back into the situations which caused the problems in the first place. Thus, the first major point of where to look now has been clearly discerned by us. While this inward journey was often interrupted by the circumstances of our lives, we have been resolute not to allow self-centeredness and materialism to lose us again. And we are so appreciative of the teachings of now creations and sharing our journeys with other like-minded souls that have kept us from getting lost again and again. We have accepted these lovely inspirational energies, these tools of life, so that we now can say with Maya Angelou, because we know better, we do better. We do better because we know better, and we're going to do even better in the future. Yet, I feel that it is the second lesson presented by both Bill and Richard that is what we need to know more and more of. For this second lesson identifies exactly what they did. What they did was they surrendered to the presence. To surrender to the presence within us and to allow that internal presence to guide us. So let's be crystal clear in this regard. You're a smart person. You're a smart person. You're intelligent, and you know yourself. Thus, you clearly know when you have not surrendered to God's Spirit. Then you know when you have surrendered to the God's Spirit. Many people still want to be in control of their lives. This is a big issue for many people. It is still apparent at times that a person will only surrender as long as they can keep control of the surrendering. They still want to be in control. They seem to want to fit their spirituality into their own control system. Isn't that exactly what Bill and Richard did? Bill's comment, alcoholics drink their religion. They use alcoholism to overcome their uncertainty and confusion. Richard used drugs. They had a hard time at the beginning because each wanted to do it their own way. This is precisely what they did at first. Each of them wanted to be in control of their limited personality self. Each of them had to learn the lesson of stop trying to control their spirituality, because they learned that their spirituality was the much larger energy that could give guidance to their weakened personalities, but it demands a surrender. And when each of them finally surrendered to the greater presence within them, they finally came to experience the meaning and the purpose of their lives, which had up to that time simply eluded them. My dear friends, this is the lesson we too must learn. This is the lesson that opens us to a much more meaningful and purposeful future, as it did for Bill and Richard. We must learn to surrender to the greater presence of our inner presence. I think there was a guy by the name of John Denver who sang a song called Sweet Surrender. The concluding words, like a fish in the water, like a bird in the air. It's all inside of us. To those words, though, I would like to add this. Like a fish in the water, like a bird in the air, like a soul in the spirit. It's all inside of us. Like Bill and Richard, we have to learn this lesson. May we come to know this greater presence, this greater power that is within us. And as we come to know it, may we surrender to its guidance. May you be in the flow of that loving presence, as eventually Bill and Richard were. And now, may the Holy Spirit truly be your guide. So in conclusion, I encourage you to read Ram Dass's book, Be Here Now, and especially to read the 12-step program of AA, which applies everywhere. Each of these presentations will show you a wonderful pathway forward, so that not only may you know better, that you will be doing better. That sweet, sweet surrender. Like a fish in the water, like a bird in the air, like a soul in spirit. Let me now take you into meditation, and what a joy it is to do so. Just nice, easy breathing. It's very helpful. It's very helpful for us to look at other human lives and see that they too have problems that many of us encounter in life. And what's extremely helpful is to realize that each one of them was willing to explore the problem and come to a solution that gave a true remedy. It's interesting to hear that quote from Bill Wilson. Alcoholics drink their religion. It's what they go to when something seems to be overwhelming. Perhaps you or someone else has had a drinking problem and you understand the significance of it and the implications of it. Or perhaps someone else has had another addiction. Perhaps you've had addiction with drugs, or perhaps your kids or grandkids. And you too know the severity of just dealing with those situations. It's not an easy thing. They seem to have a problem, and then the problem, unfortunately, makes them take drugs as their solution. And then they have two problems, the original one and the addiction problem. Now, it's very easy. It's very easy to simply criticize the addiction problems and the addictions themselves. That's why Bill and Richard are very important for us. They acknowledged that they were moving in a less than adequate direction. And they found something that could really solve the problem. And not only that problem, but every subsequent problem in life. So as we address the opportunity of meditation, it's such an important thing for us to not try to hammer it home that people develop the practice, but rather encouraging each other to experience the power of the practice. Whether you had a white light experience like Bill, or like for most of us, we have just plodded along step by step, working at it, working at it, working at it. We have come to experience its power. And we have taken that very difficult step to relinquish our desire to control the meditation. Seems like we were always trying to fit it in. Had to try to fit it in at the right time. Had to try to fit it in as part of your practice. But quite frankly, you were still controlling it. That was often called the spiritual ego, still trying to control it. And then, slowly but surely, there was a change that occurred. Through the consistent teachings of now creations, through the consistent examples of the members of now creations being of like mind, the beginnings of your surrender occurred. The stronger you were control-minded, the more difficult the surrender was, and perhaps still is. It necessitated a change in your sense of self from the personality self to your soul. And then it necessitated your willingness to live from the spirit world as your guide. But gradually, your mind stopped trying to overrun you. And your soul began to prompt you by intuitions that were much more effective than all of your past mental habits. And for many of us, this has become the best part of our day. It is what most grounds us in life. We look forward to it, just as we're doing right now. We look forward to this. It's a wonderful experience. You're smart. Don't dumb yourself down by trying to control things again. You're smart. Don't dumb yourself down. Like a fish in the water. Like a bird in the air. Like a soul in the spirit. Ah, that sweet, sweet wind. And in that energy, in the sweetness of the energy you're feeling right now, let me invite you back to your breath. And just notice that sweetness at your center. And gently breathing your eyes open, still in that sweet, sweet energy. I am an eternal being of light and love. Thus, only good can come to me, and only good can come from me. And we are eternal beings of light and love. Thus, only good can come to us, and only good can come from us. Namaste.